Hello everyone, I'm Angelica, aka Gunsmile, and today I want to talk about the history of the Khar on Edom. In a typical fantasy setting, the human calendar is the standard, based on our real one, but with changes to make it more, well, fantastical. Other races might use different calendars to showcase what sets them apart from their peers, based on lifespan, religion, culture, or values. In Orken, though, the Khar have no need for such precise timekeeping. For them, the minutes, hours, days, and even weeks and months are not worth tracking. Instead, they'll record decades, marking off each one as different skins in their lives. Children are in their first and second skins, while elders are in their fifth or more. And beyond that, the Khar keep record of the passing eras, called tides. Each one is characterized by massive changes to the land of Edom and to Khar society as a whole. In this video, we'll go over each one to get a broad understanding of this history. The first tide, the spirit tide, began at the moment of creation, when the unconquered sun Nutu willed the universe into existence. Like in most mythic cosmologies, both real and fictional, this early era was characterized by the close interaction of the spirit world and the mundane world. In fact, the veil between them was so thin it was almost non-existent. While the totems guided their followers, the old titans guarded the land, maintaining the fine balance in Edom. The spirit tide was a golden age, where resources were plentiful, the land overflowed with bounty, and the Khar flourished. It was during this era that their greatest heroes and myths were born, and that the foundations were laid for everlasting peace among the tribes. Now, every society has their apocalypse, and the Khar are no different. The cryptic symbolism of the final dream remains undeciphered, the signs heralding its arrival unnoticed until far too late. The first sign came to pass in this way, with the mass deaths of the old titans across the continent, and with wildfires in the west consuming the land, with the melting of the great glacier called Grom's White Plume, and with the arrival of the first Jakar in the east. Baku, the snake totem, appeared in the night sky and placed her moon there to oppose the unconquered sun. The Khar were forced to move, their very lives uprooted as famine choked the land. What choice did they have? So ended the first tide, the spirit tide, and in the dark years that followed, there came a greater devastation: Gethwinter. Gethwinter is a spiritual disease. It's triggered by destructive bloodlust and spreads like an infection. It turns its victims into mindless, rage-filled beasts that kill and eat their own kin. Starving and homeless, the Khar succumbed to Gethwinter at the onset of the second tide, and proceeded to tear each other apart in blood-soaked frenzies. And though the Khar were the first to be infected, by the end of it, no tribe was spared. Worst of all, there is no cure for Gethwinter, no antidote. The only remedy is death. Of the total population of Khar alive at the time, 90% died during the Tide of Gethwinter. Many tribes went extinct at the hands of their cousins. The spirit world was not left unscathed by devastation during this dark time. The totems rose up against each other in a mindless war for supremacy. Most totems were slaughtered or escaped into dormancy until only 7 remained. Fortunately, all things come to an end, even Gethwinter. In the aftermath, both the planes of the spirit world and the mundane world lay in tatters. Only 7 totems and 4 tribes survived. But when the Khar looked upon their ancestral homes, they found that invaders had taken over, seizing their chance for power while the Khar had been slaughtering each other. These opportunistic vermin were the primordials, the Bulvai, the Gem, and the Azuli. For centuries, they had lived in the shadow of the Khar, but no more. In a rare display of intertribal unity, the Khar declared war on the primordials. Driving them to the edges of Edom, the Khar hunted them in a merciless purge. This was the third tide, the war tide, an era of heroic deeds and valiant sacrifices, of Khar unity and triumph. Finally, centuries of violence gave way to a fragile peace, but it was no longer possible to return to the glorious golden age of the spirit tide. The spirit world and mundane world had completely separated from each other, with the totems divvying up the remaining tribes amongst themselves and vying with each other for dominance. Meanwhile, the alliance of the Khar disintegrated. Collaboration and harmony gave way to envy and distrust. They divided up the ruins of their ancient homelands and drew borders between their territories. To make matters worse, the Khar had lost a wealth of knowledge and history in the previous centuries of disease and death. Still, they began to rebuild their civilization, a true testament to their resiliency and strength. And so began the fourth tide, the Dawn Tide. which was aptly named, for in the years following the war against the Primordials, the Khar experienced a resurgence. The fallow fields of Kirkazul burst forth with abundance once more, while temples dedicated to the 7 totems were restored to their former greatness. Despite the enmity that still existed between the tribes, it was an era of hope and stability. But the dark omen of the final dream continued to loom over the heads of the Khar. While the first sign had brought catastrophe, starvation, death, and disease upon Edom, the second sign brought discord in the form of the Midnight Wolf. The infamous 8th totem, Koikosan manifested himself through sheer will to defy the long-established reign of Tubalkai, the Sabertooth. Many Gorokhar have flocked to Koikosan's banner, their minds poisoned by his teachings, pledging themselves as agents of his will. The land of Edom and the Khar who rule it have seen 4 tides come and go, eras of peace, of prosperity, of war, despair, and unity and strife. But nothing could have prepared them for the arrival of the 5th tide. From across the vast ocean, wearing armor of steel, came the humans. It began in the north, with the toppling of the monuments of Ukir. In the 33 winters that have passed since then, the people of metal have set fire to Edom. They have claimed the eastern coastline, stripping the land bare for their foul cities. They have brought genocide to Iteka, once the homeland of dozens of Jakar bloodlines. They push up the river Yonta, drawing closer to the gates of Kirkazul. Once more, the Khar beat the drums of war. If they do not stand together, then they will fall, one by one, to human conquest. If you enjoyed this video, I highly recommend checking out the website at orkenworld.com and signing up for the Kickstarter, which I will link in the description box below. Until then, be kind to each other.